Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found the information on last week's show impact your audience, grow your community, and profitize your list informative. If you are unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. If you'd like to receive notifications on when our podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. And if there are topics you'd find beneficial or questions you have, please feel free to reach out to me at media@abandp.com. Now let's learn a little bit about our guest today. Alexis White is a consultant, strategist, and business coach that offers small business owners the skills and expertise to help them create, scale, and deliver products, services, or results that increase revenue. As a certified project management professional and Scrum Master with experience leading projects from inception to launch for both public and private sectors, she's adaptable in leading information technology and telecommunications projects. However, she's most passionate about helping small businesses identify and solve complex organizational issues that can impede growth. With over 13 years of experience implementing information technology and telecommunications projects, specific areas of expertise include infrastructure, data, cybersecurity, and the mobile workforce. Previous experience includes e-commerce platforms, software development, voice, wireless, and VoIP, audiovisual integrations, digital supply chain, and ERP augmentations. So Alexis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk about this today. It's another great topic for entrepreneurs to understand how to have a more efficient business. But before I get into questions I would love for you just to tell me a little bit more about yourself and how did you even get involved with project management?
So ironically, this was not the trajectory I had envisioned for my life at all.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was a communications major, and unfortunately, I graduated during the economic downturn of 2008. So at that point, if we all remember what that was like, nobody had jobs. If we thought the pandemic was destructive, you should have saw 2008 because it was just like people were being laid off by the boatloads. You had a bunch of college graduates that were entering the workforce without jobs. And that was like the first time you've really seen people graduate from tier 1 schools and they were not employed. And so I spent the summer driving around. I knew I was moving to Atlanta. Now that much I didn't know. And I did move, but I spent the entire summer driving around, trying to find a job. And I kept networking with other people. And so I ended up getting a job as an entry-level dispatcher at Dish Network. But what I didn't realize was that was the foundation. At the time, I didn't understand. It was the foundation for my career because it started to introduce me into technical concepts and integrations, dealing with customers. So managing your stakeholders from internal and external resources, keeping your customers happy, making sure you're communicating with them in advance. And so it just really opened my eyes to what I can do. And while I was not always the most content with that role, it was very stressful. But as I started to build my career, someone pointed out to me that that was a form of project management. And so as I started to grow my career, I started to understand what project management was, and I grew a more interest of it, and it just went from there.
Right. I always love hearing the stories too of how someone became involved. I mean, so many of us in business didn't intend to be business owners. We just had a path that we ended up following and led us to where we are. So that's why I like to have kind of that little bit of background just to know, how did you get where you are now?
Exactly.
So for those who don't really know what the concept is, could you give a definition of project management and what a project manager does?
Absolutely. So, project management is very diverse. It can apply to any industry, any particular field. There's no limit to what it is, right? Project management simply is the management and oversight of scope, cost, schedule, and budget with your resources and communicating amongst others all at the same time to deliver a particular product, service, or result. It has a start and a finish date. So I know that that is textbook, but the reality is most of us do this every single day and we don't even realize that we're doing it. Starting a business is a form of project management because your desire is to launch a product, introduce a service, and to obtain a result. You start planning ahead of time. Your go live date is your opening date. So you're doing all of these things anyway. You're learning how to
Right.
communicate with vendors and suppliers, and you're learning how to communicate with contractors and all of these different things, and you're managing all of this because at the end of the day, if they deviate from the schedule, that costs you money. So in the world of
Right.
project management, that's known as a triple constraint. So you want your time, your schedule, and your money to all be in alignment, and as you shift, something else is going to shift. So going back to that example, if your contractor is not going to have your paint up and ready to go for grand opening, now that's delaying the grand opening, and that's going to cost you money because now you're not able to move forward in the time frame that you thought that you were going to be able to move forward.
Mhm. Very true. Yes. So, I mean, obviously, we're talking to business owners. Some of them are starting, businesses soon. Some have started in the last maybe year, 18 months, and some have been in business for years and years and years. So we have a different, array of people. But why does someone listening to this today have to think about having a project manager help them, manage and scale and deliver their quality products and having that manager assist them?
So I'm glad you asked that question and you brought up a good point. In project management, one thing that is good to know is that continuous improvement is a form of project management. So just because you release a product or a service out there in the world doesn't mean that you don't have to revisit and continuously improve upon that. So what that means is whatever processes you have, you need to go back and repeat it if it's forms of process documentation, improving it to remove inefficiencies, to improve productivity, or even to retrain people because we all know someone trains us to do something and then we find a shortcut, right? So you want to make sure that you're revisiting those processes continuously with your team to continuously improve your customer experience. People have businesses because of an experience, right? So it's not just enough to give your specific skill. I need to have an experience while I'm getting that skill from you. So if I come to you as a mechanic to fix my car and you fix it, but then tomorrow I'm still having the same issue, not only do I have a poor experience, but I also am most likely not going to come back to you because of skills and expertise. So those
Right.
are things that you need to keep into consideration, even if you have a long-standing business, that is something that is needed. A business owner should always want to have a standby consultant on hand to run things by to help them streamline what that thought process looks like. A lot of times we think that we have the best answer for what it is that we're doing, and we don't. So, the one thing that I would say, even when you are experiencing this type of thought and idea, it's always good to run it by someone else that can better help you to be able to navigate through what it is that you're trying to navigate through. A lot of times people will tell you things, and when you start digging underneath the hood, it is not what you thought it was. People say, oh, yeah, yeah, I can do this in 3 days. But really, it comes down to 5 days or 12 days.
Mm.
And that again costs you money because now you're waiting. So you need to be able to go back and understand how to go back, rather, to the contract and be able to say, okay, this is a delay in schedule, which is costing me. This is something that we did not discuss. So how are you going to compensate me? Or if you're the business owner, you started going down one way and then you say, you know what, I changed my mind and I want to go somewhere else. And they hang you a change order and you're like,
Right.
well, what is this bill for? You need to understand what these things are so that you're not wasting money investing in services that are not going to yield tangible results for you in your undertaking.
That's so true. And I know you mentioned having a consultant that you can refer to, and I know that's an investment in your business, right? When you pay someone to do that, they give you advice, they make you more efficient. In the long run, it does save you time, resources, and there's a return on the investment. But if someone is saying right now, I just like, maybe they're a startup and they're thinking, I really just don't have the resources available right now. I would love to have that, but right now I just can't afford that. Do you have some tools or resources that you would recommend to help them through the process until they can get there?
Absolutely. So that's where I would definitely recommend having a business coach available. And again, it's still an investment, but you're paying for access to an expertise and a
Mhm.
discipline to be able to guide and coach you on the right steps and help you strategize on what they may look like for you. Because again, when we're thinking everything is up here, right? And we think we have it all worked out until you hit a rabbit hole and you're like, but this means this, and now I have to do this, and I didn't know anything about that. How does this throw off my plan and my projected timeline for being able to move forward? So even if you can't invest in a long-term consultant to actually help execute the work for you, invest at least in a business coach that can better guide you. And those are things that I can do remotely. It's not like I have to be on site. We can just talk it out and I can write down some things and help guide you on what the best approach would be moving forward.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very important for people to realize too is, and I think their eyes are opened recently in the last 2 years, since the COVID shutdown and people have had to work remotely and stay apart. But most industries, you can work with someone virtually and they don't have to be in your same, location to help you. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well.
That's right. Anything can be done remotely. That's the benefit of working in a tech space is that while we like to collaborate and we love face-to-face interaction and we love being able to touch it and get our hands dirty and put paper up on the walls and just put a whole bunch of, we call that a Kaizen or a mapping event, where we just put up papers on the wall and just write and put sticky notes and just stick it to the wall and
Right.
come back to it and, put this in the parking lot. We love to do those things, right? But the reality is that technology has afforded us access to multiple tools that we can collaborate in real time and still get the same interaction. And you actually gain time because now you're
Mhm.
not traveling to get there. You're not sitting in traffic. You don't have to stop what you're doing to run somewhere else. You can do it at your leisure. So that's the benefit of working remotely as well.
Right. So, how would a project manager help a business owner manage their risk?
That is a great question. So, risk management can be very tricky to someone who does not know what that is, right? But
Mhm.
there's two type of risks. There's a positive, which we call opportunities, and then there's a negative risk that is a consequence, right?
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example of both. Let's say, for example, you're thinking about undertaking a new endeavor in your business. You've done it before, but you are adding on something else to it. Okay. So now you've identified an opportunity to grow a particular part of your business, but it's risky because it has never been done before. So now we're exploiting an opportunity in hopes of a positive gain. Or you could be doing something regularly, right? And you come across an opportunity that you didn't know existed. Now you found it and you can exploit that for a positive return. So those are good things, right? And that's in its most simplest form. A bad
Right.
thing is, or a negative risk would be this may happen. I'm aware it may happen. I'm not planning for it. Or it happens and I knew it was potentially going to happen but then I didn't anticipate the outcome to be as severe as it was. So I say all that to say, in summary, it's important to look at what each action and reaction or consequence will be and make sure that we have a plan for that. Because a lot of times we're just like, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Or I wasn't anticipating this to happen, but this happened. Those are all positive and negative risks that a business owner definitely can benefit from managing if you do the proper planning on the front end.
Right. Yeah, it's just, again, it's important. Everything that you're going to do, there's going to be opportunities, or there will be some risk, whether it's, you're going to start something new and you're investing resources to put that together and you're hoping, that it becomes a great seller, right? You sell your product, but there's a risk that maybe it wouldn't. So definitely looking at both sides of it is, I think, really important too. And we don't always think about looking at both sides.
So in real terms, in today's climate, supply chain is a huge risk. You may or may not have things when you anticipate on having it. It may or may not cost what you thought it was going to cost, because of inflation. So these are all risks that you have to plan for today to make sure that you can mitigate. You can transfer by saying, you know what, my vendor said I have a firm fixed price, so I'm not responsible for your inflation. That's on you, buddy. You need to know how to navigate these types of real world situations, or to be able to negotiate. So if your lead time was previously 2 weeks to receive a good and now it's turned into 4 weeks, okay, how are you going to respond to that? And do you have some way to cover if the merchandise is not on your shelves? What is your plan then? So these are things that real-time business owners need to learn how to navigate in order to be successful with their operations.
Right. So what are 6 reasons project management is critical for success?
Absolutely. So there's many reasons why it's critical for success. However, you want to make sure that you're doing realistic planning. Whatever it is that you're planning, you want to tie it into your strategic goals for your business. So what that means is, if I am a knitting shop on Etsy, it makes no sense for me to start selling auto parts, right? I don't care how lovely my husband is, I'm not selling auto parts out of my shop on Etsy. Now, I know that's a drastic, example there, but you understand what I'm saying. It has to make sense, and you want it to tie into your overall strategic plan. You want to make sure that you have a clear focus on what your objectives are for undertaking that project. And if you have other stakeholders like other business owners or investors, you want to make sure that they're in alignment with why you're doing what you're doing. Understanding your why. I know we hear that so much, but it's so important when you're undertaking a project that you understand why you're doing what you're doing. You want to make sure that you're documenting processes for how this is going to translate once it's live. You want to train people on how to, so if you have a new cashier system and you went from the that actual old school cashier to an iPad with Cash App, you want to make sure that everybody is prepared to make that transition. Change management is important because now you have to be able to communicate with your internal teams and maybe with your external teams in the forms of your customers. Our process now is this, and you want to get ahead and communicate that out in advance so that if they've been accustomed to undertaking a certain endeavor to get your products, that they're not caught off guard when that's no longer the process or something has changed. Also, you want to make sure that quality is at play. And I want to stress quality because many times we underestimate what that means. So in the quickest form of fashion, it's not enough for only your products as a business owner to be quality. You want your team to execute quality. You want everything affiliated with your brand to reflect quality. Otherwise, we all know it's a million and one other businesses out there that someone else can go support in your perspective lane. So you want to make sure that you have that under wraps. And lastly, you want to ensure that you have reduced your waste. You don't have money to waste. You don't have time to waste. So you want to make sure for most definitely that you have increased productivity, that you are reducing any inefficiencies that result in waste.
That's so true. And when you talked about change management, making sure, your staff has plenty of time to know, this transition is happening. I think too, taking into consideration that some people can adapt very quickly and some it's going to take, a bit of time, whether they just don't like change in general, or maybe technology is something that they struggle with. So it's going to take them more time, and really planning that into your whole transition to give time for your staff to get caught up on that.
Exactly. And let's be clear, it's not limited to technology. I just use a technological example, right? But it can literally be anything. Let's say, for example, you were planning to move your business from this location to another. You need everybody to know what that's going to look like, right? And
Right.
not only as internal resources communicating to external parties, your stakeholders being your customers, but how is this going to affect them? Because if you, let's say, for example, you have a hair salon, and I love coming to your current salon because it's only 2 minutes away, but now you're moving to a larger salon that's 5 minutes away, and I can't walk there and I don't have a car. So am I willing to take an Uber to get there? These are things that you have to think about. I know it's the silliest of examples, but it's in the most simplified way of saying that business owners need to think about these things. And the reality is, you're not. You're
Right.
busy trying to run an operation for your busy business. You are
Right.
trying to ensure you have stock, payroll, human resources, staff, that's the big one.
Right.
You have other things consuming your thought process on a daily basis that, unless you have the training of this specific discipline, you have no clue what to expect. So these things
Right.
can be coming out of left field for you. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Yeah. What am I going to do? Bang, hit here. And there's
Right.
people that can do that for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's so true, because every change you make is going to have an impact. And like you said, some might be positive, some might be negative, but thinking through all of those potential scenarios, we don't have time. I mean, as business owners, right? We don't have time to think through all of that.
You don't. And that's why it's an investment to hire somebody who can do that for you. Because
Mhm.
as I've had 13 years of experience, I can hear something that may not stick out to you, but it stands out to me. And
Mhm.
someone may say, why does she keep going back to that sticking point? Because it's an important one that I'm hearing. Or we could be listening to the same message. I mean, that's just in regular communication. So it's not specific to project management, but we could be in the same meeting. And I could hear something that's being conveyed to you from a vendor that you didn't hear, but I heard. And I'm like, that is risky. So the lead time is going to be this, the complete cycle time is this, and this is going to, I can hear that quicker than you can because I
Right.
have a trained ear and a trained mind to pick up on things like that. So it's always good to have someone that you can run things by if you're uncertain, because believe me, it will save you a lot more money in the long run if you invest
Right.
on the front end to have somebody that you can take along with you on that investment.
Mhm. So true. And I know earlier in our conversation too, you were talking about having, the scope spelled out, but can you explain again to someone who's still not quite sure exactly what you mean about having a scope statement, what that is and why is it so important?
Absolutely. So the scope is key. That's telling us what we're doing. It may
Mhm.
not always tell you how it's going to be done. So you have to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, when you're doing it, and why you're doing it. So those are key questions. And what's important about the scope statement is that it's going to say, in order for us to implement this, we assume that you're going to have this. We forecast that these will be some constraints that we need your help with identifying and making sure that we mitigate these things in order for this to materialize. Many times, and I love to give this example about building a house, right? So a scope statement is, I'm building a house. We know that the house has to have a kitchen, bathroom, and a bedroom at minimum. That's what makes it a house, right? It
Right.
doesn't say the walls are going to be painted white. The house, it will say the house is going to be 2,000 square feet, but it's not going to go into detail about exactly, where. It's going to say the stove is going to be in the kitchen because that's where it belongs, right?
Right.
But it may not say to you, okay, so when it comes down to the internet, we need you to have an activated account in order for us to make this a smart house because that's the technological thing right now. So
Mhm.
that's going to be an assumption that once they run all the cables for your electricity and they do all the plumbing and they put up the drywalls and all of that, that they will be able to come in and install the cable. If
Mhm.
they don't, that's going to be an issue because now when they go in to install your lights and install Alexa, it's not going to operate because the internet is not there. So that, I mean, I know that that's a stretch, but that's an example of why that scope statement is important. And again, you can hold people accountable. So when they come back and they say, oh, well, putting down marble floors wasn't in the scope statement. No, but there's a clause in the statement that says that I have the right to choose my own materials. And if I say that it's going to be marble, I just pay you for the cost difference than the wood, right? So you have to understand how to mitigate through that. And a lot of times people don't. They're just like, oh my God, I can't have the marble floors. What am I going to do? I don't. Okay, well, just install the wood and then I'll change them later. No, you don't have to accept that.
Right. So good. Well, and I think, like I said, when you are looking at scope, and there are things you have to pay attention to, that if something is coming along that wasn't part of the original scope, figuring out what you're going to be doing with that and how that's going to be handled.
Absolutely. And understanding who's responsible for these changes.
Mhm.
That's the key. If it's a decision that I make as the customer and they come back and say, well, that was not in scope, it is understood
Right.
that you have to pay the cost difference. But if
Mhm.
it's the vendor or the supplier coming back, and then I'm saying, no, that's in scope. That's what I asked for. So if
Right.
they're not delivering something that I asked for, they're responsible for covering those costs and making it right. So that's where you need to understand the intricacies and complexities of signing contracts, especially proposals, because inside those proposals typically lies a scope, right? You just have to do the back end planning of what it is that you're trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve it. But you need that scope statement. And a lot of times people just start doing things and they don't necessarily know what they're doing. They're just doing something and you end up in trouble and you end up in a rabbit hole for sure.
Mhm. Well, I think that's where some of the issues come, is like a misunderstanding of what that scope really is. If a customer thinks it includes, X, Y, Z, and the vendor is assuming it's only going to be X and Y, right? That's a problem. So making sure that everything is spelled out so everyone knows what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, I think that's very important.
Exactly. And work together on understanding how it's going to be done as well.
Mhm. Right. So obviously this is strategic, the project management in the business, you need to be able to use this to plan everything out. But can you just again explain to someone who is thinking, well, maybe I don't really need this as much. I just, can handle what I've got. I don't have to have a real formal thing. How would that affect their strategic planning?
So it definitely affects it because at the
Mhm.
end of the day, if you don't think about these things, that plan could go wayward real quick.
Mhm.
You can miss your goals. And the thing is that your projects need to carefully align to what your goals and objectives are for your business. So even though the everyday management of a project becomes tactical, the overall undertaking is strategic because it goes back to adding value to your business. No one's going to
Mhm.
do anything if it does not add value to your business. And at the end of the day, every business owner's goal is to increase revenue. So you
Right.
don't want to go down. Everybody wants to have that multi-million dollar business. And even then, McDonald's, as large as McDonald's is, they're always revising their menu. They're bringing things back. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. They introduce things as pilots. But the goal is to get someone who would not consider eating at McDonald's previously to consider stopping at McDonald's to eat a salad or to grab a chicken sandwich and to remain competitive. So it very much so is in tandem with your strategic visions for what it is that you want to do with your business.
Right. I think it's interesting too. You brought up, McDonald's, which of course is a franchise, and franchises have very thought out plans of how you do certain things so that it's the same, throughout all of the different locations that you might go to, which of course is also part of this management, right? Whether it's how you prepare a hamburger, right? And you put certain things on in a certain order or whatever. So I think it's interesting to even touch on that, is this really is something that's going to make you efficient and, save you time, energy, resources, all of that, when you really have a plan and you can follow it continuously over and over and over again.
Absolutely. And again, that continuous improvement, because if the process
Mhm.
says that you do not put ketchup on before the mustard, and someone comes to evaluate and they see you putting the pickle and the mustard on before the ketchup, as minute as that may seem, that can be a really big deal, right? So you
Right.
want to make sure that you have documented processes that you can train your staff on and continuously improve. What if a person who did a shortcut identified that if I put the pickle and the mustard on first before the ketchup, then it increases time because now I'm not walking back and forth from the refrigerator to the counter to do that. Something simple as that, right?
Right.
So it always goes into how do you continuously improve your business and try
Right.
to drive efficiencies, because maybe that was a way that you didn't think about, like those extra 4 steps over time cost you another minute in paying somebody, something like
Right.
that. It
Right.
has happened before, in a previous environment that I worked for. We walked and we literally mapped where this person goes throughout the day, and we had a map and it was lines going all back and forth just like this, and it's like, oh my God, now I understand why you don't get anything done, because you're spending half your workday walking back and forth across a 5,000 square foot warehouse. Like,
Mm,
think about Amazon, right?
right.
Amazon has machines with artificial intelligence. Even though people do get their steps in working at Amazon, make no mistake, but at the end of the day, they are as efficient as possible. And if they introduce something or identify something as not being efficient, they're going to try to mitigate that as much as possible. Because at the
Right.
end of the day, you want your package in 2 hours, and so do I. So,
Right.
time is of
Exactly.
the essence.
Hmm. Well, I think when you mentioned continuous improvement too, I think what's important to think about too is, our staff who are doing the things on a day-to-day basis, they may see something that could help us make improvements too. So really being open to talking with your staff and getting input from them, I think is really a wise decision as well.
Absolutely. It is imperative that organizations have a two-way communication. And typically, when you're doing continuous improvement, there in the world of project management, it's called a Kaizen, and that's a type of continuous improvement. And you want to have staff that are doing the job each and every day, like you said, to come back and to provide feedback. And I know with this being everyone's baby, we don't want to hear anything negative about, you can't tell me my baby is ugly. Like that's just not, no one wants to hear that, right? But the reality is things change every day. They do the job. You're more far removed from it than you once were. Because now
Right.
that's what makes you a business owner, right? When you're an entrepreneur,
Right.
you're doing everything yourself. But as you transition into a business owner and you hire staff to support you, maybe they see something that you don't. So when you come into those conversations, bear an open mind. And if you have to plant this seed and not get rid of it, remember they can be telling you something that can increase productivity, that will increase your revenue. It removes an inefficiency, which saves you money.
Right.
So at the end of the day, money should always be okay. It's about the money. It's about the money. Equate it to be about the money in your mind, so that you don't hear the negativity, you hear the positivity, which makes that an
Right.
opportunity for you to exploit, which is a good risk.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, this has been a great conversation. I know we're coming close to the end of the time that we have together. So I would ask you if you have an offer that you would like to share with our listeners.
Absolutely. So if they tell me that they heard about me on your show today, I will give them a free consultation that has a value of $197. The consultation will consist of us meeting, having a conversation. I will take back what we said, think about what we talked about, and provide you with some best practices and recommendations on how to improve the issues that you have. So that's where the cost comes in. But you won't have to be worried about that today because you will be getting it for free. So your code of the day will be to business help for you.
Okay, we'll do that. Biz help for you. And
Yep.
I'll need to edit this part of the thing here. So,
Mhm.
okay, well, thank you for that offer. That sounds wonderful. And if anyone does want to reach you, what are the best ways for them to connect with you?
They can connect with me on my website at alexisnicolewhite.com. And I'm also on Instagram, at Twitter and everyone's going to laugh when I say this, but because I envision Oprah saying my name one day, my name is AAHHLLEEXXIISS. So it's Alexis.
Right. That's great. That's awesome. So, but this has been a fun conversation and informative, and I think listeners are going to have learned a lot. So I appreciate your taking the time to be with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate the time, and I hope that the listeners have learned something that's very invaluable and just be like, oh, I never thought about that.
Exactly. And I do want to thank the listeners actually for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and that it answered some of your questions about how project management can save you time and money. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to Alexis or send us a message at media@abandp.com. And would you please share our show information with those you know? I'd really appreciate your support. I hope you can join us for next week's topic, Stop Discounting and Instead Use Value Add Incentives. And please remember, you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. Remember, you can also find the podcast posted on multiple favorite podcast platforms, including Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Until next time, have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next Tuesday. Have a terrific week.